because I'm doing a job that I'm passionate about and that I absolutely love. And I never feel like I go to work. I feel like I come and see my mates for 12 hours a day and we have a chat and occasionally we'll put a few buildings up. So my name's Anthony Rouse and I am a Senior Quantity Surveyor. So my role is basically I look after all of the financial aspects of construction on a building site. So from start to finish, I'll be given a budget and then it's down to me to then make that budget work to build whatever it is that we're building. So if it's flats or if it's houses, I'd basically get given X amount of money and said, this is what you need to build it for, this is how much money we want to make, go and make it work. So then I would then go in tender to different subcontractors, so I'd go out to different subcontractors to price various bits of work and take that through, decide which one we were going to use, and then I would write the contract for them as well. So the legally binding part and the financial part is sort of what I deal with on a construction site. When I was younger, I thought maybe I wanted to be an architect. I always had a passion for construction. I really love seeing the way that things go together from start to finish. And then I realised quite quickly I wasn't very good at drawing. So I decided that I was quite good at maths and physics and bits and pieces. So I went to a careers fair at school, came across it, met up with a family friend who was in the construction industry and did my work experience and fell in love with it. And I've done it ever since. So I did my work experience at 14. I then I carried on with school, but every summer, every Easter, I used to go and sort of intern at the same business. And then I did a year at college because I wanted to make sure that I tried a few other things before I committed myself. Decided that this was the role or this was the way I wanted to go, so then I went back to the same company and they put me through the apprenticeship scheme. I did law, psychology, product design and history, so completely different to what I was doing before, but they were the other subjects that I was sort of interested in, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't committing myself to a career if I found one of my other interests really peaked at a bit of an older age, because at 14 I sort of decided I'll do construction, and then 17, 18 you sort of think, oh maybe I'll do something else, but in the long run it all worked out. So usually you would do, at the company at the time I did a 2-year sort of apprenticeship scheme, so I went to university 1 day a week, part-time at Solent University, and did construction management, and that was for 2 years. And then at the company I also spent periods of time within different facets of the business. So although I knew I wanted to be a surveyor, I went and worked on site for a period of time. I worked in accounts, worked with sales, technical, all different areas, so that when I came back to surveying, I knew that any decision I made and the interface that was with other people, I knew the effect that would have on other people as well. So it was a good way of getting good grounding of a business as well as sort of how your role fits into that business as well. It was office stuff predominantly. So I would go in and I do a lot of admin, but it was being surrounded in that environment and you would pick up on things. And then during the summer I was there for a 6-week stint. So they would get me almost running like small projects for them, sort of getting me used to the process and sitting in meetings. And it was almost like a small apprenticeship every time that I used to go back. So as a business, they were really good to me in that sense, that they really took me under their wing and looked after me when they didn't really need to during those summer holidays. But it was a benefit to me and hopefully it was a benefit to them at the time. A typical day for me at work, I usually get in pretty early. I like to get in before other people just because it means I can sort of gather my thoughts and what I need to sort of prioritise for the day. So I usually come in, unload the dishwasher, put the cafetiere on for the coffee, and then I check my email. So if anything's happened overnight that I need to sort of get on with, make a to-do list for the day, and then sort of get on with bits and pieces. Certain periods of the month we prioritise payments, so paying our subcontractors, our suppliers, making sure all of that's done. Other parts of the month I need to prioritise our monthly reports, which go up to our head office, which is a huge part of what we do. And then the other sort of 2 weeks of the month are procurement, so tendering the packages to the subcontractors or getting designs up together and putting all of that and formulating all that information. So it all depends on what time of the month it is, but Yeah, usually get in quite early, have usually a bit of a debrief in the kitchen with the guys, what we did the night before, and coffee and stuff like that, and then yeah, emails and whatever it is that I need to do that sort of day. Yeah. So every day is quite different, but every month it would be first and middle week of the month would be first and third week of the month would be payments, making sure they're all done for half of the month, like mid-month and month-end payments. And then the other weeks, the last week is always reports, which it takes up pretty much my whole week. It's quite detailed. And then the other week is very much procurement, getting those packages together and catching up on anything else I haven't managed to get on with. In my role, because I'm very much commercial, the thing that I enjoy the most is getting to the nitty-gritty of finalising the deal. So when we go out to tender, the process is that we'll have a package which will go out to 5 people, they'll come back, price it, we'll analyse it, and then it's down to us to make sure that we've included everything within that package and then decide which one we want to go with. And it's at that stage you almost go to 2 people and it's fighting it out to see who's going to do which bit, and then sitting down in a room like this and having a conversation with people and doing a deal and shaking hands on it. I really enjoy that part of it. And then the actual physical seeing it on site. When you see something like this particular site at Chapel Riverside, the ground we had archaeological work, so we were putting up bodies. We've got old piles that are in the ground, which are going to affect where we put the next phase. There's a lot of extra work on this development, so then to see it go from that to the flats, the people moving in, the finished product, it's that whole process as well. Yeah, so it was an old burial site. So the site is called Chapel Riverside, so there used to be a chapel here. So before we could do any construction works, we had the archaeologists in, and we initially thought there was only going to be about 40 bodies. I think we pulled out 80 in the end, some of which have gone to various museums. We've still got some artefacts that we're putting up now that we're doing some more excavations. So yeah, so there was quite a lot of historical presence on this particular development. Dealing with people. A lot of the time you deal with people from very different walks of life or different companies. One day you could be dealing with managing director of a multi-million-pound business, and the next day you could be dealing with a forklift driver who's just crashed into your wall. And so it's the frustrations and the dealings with various people at different aspects of what we do, but it's part of the excitement, I think, is dealing with those people and how you deal with those people, because sometimes the frustration can boil over, especially on a construction site, so you need to make sure you got all your eggs in the right place. So that role came through my careers day. When I was at school, did a careers day. I think it might have been at St Mary's or something like that. And partly I was drawn to it because of the financial aspect of it. You can make quite a lot of money being a surveyor, but I wanted to be in construction. It was finding the right move into what I wanted to do. I was always technically minded, so I could have sort of gone that route, but I think looking at drawings all day wasn't really for me, so I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of the pounds and pence and how all of that sort of worked. But yeah, I did it through a careers day, but it was also, I was pushed a little bit by our family friend who was the managing director at Linden Homes at the time, and he was quite encouraging to say, this is the route I think you should take. And I was very fortunate to have quite good mentors at quite a young age, which sort of helped me. Previously, no, you could have got into it through a company and they would have happily have not put anybody through university, but it's changed a lot since then. So now it's recommended that you do at least a minimum of an H&C. It's preferable that you do the degree, and it's completely personal preference, but you can then go on to do your RICS, which is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. So that would be like your accreditation. The H&C you can do anywhere, you can do any manner of courses. I did construction management, Portsmouth do a quantity surveying or an estate management, so there's plenty of courses part-time, and then you could also do it full-time as well. So if you wanted to get into it now, my recommendation is find a business that's willing to invest in young people. They would put you through the university course, so they'll usually pay for your uni fees. You work there 4 days a week, go to uni 1 day a week, so you get the practical experience of working day in, day out. as well as the benefit of the practice of the sort of written way as well, getting the qualification on the side. Usually the RICS, or if you were going to go into more building construction side, it's the CIOB, so the Chartered Institute of Builders, slightly different accreditations for different roles. Usually you would apply for that yourself. You need to then find a mentor, but again, some companies will also sort of sponsor you through that as well, because it benefits them as much as it benefits you. So the HNC is a course at uni where you do coursework, and that's just, it's almost like you were there full time, but you're only there 1 day a week. Same with the degree, that would follow on from the part-time, so it's usually 5 years, 2 years for the HNC, 3 years for the degree, if you did it part-time, 3 years if you did it full-time. And then the RICS or CIOB is where you do a portfolio, so you would have to do a recommended amount of hours of continual performance development, so going to seminars or doing workshops, things like that, to keep your knowledge base up. You would then do a diary to record the sort of day-to-day of what you do, and then you would do a portfolio and say, these are all of the things that we should be doing in the industry, this is good practice, this is bad practice, this is what we think, and then you would present it to the board of the accreditation. So there's different stages. You can be an associate, where you're a younger member. If you haven't got much experience, you're just starting out, you'd be, I think it's an associate, and then you go up to a member, which is when you've got more experience and you've got a qualification, and then eventually you become chartered with them. Yeah, the way I view it is it's almost like the same as if you did a master's in any other degree. For us in construction, the chartership is the equivalent, is the way I view it, and it's a more beneficial way of going about it, because you could go and do a master's in construction, but actually that's very much the theory side of things, whereas the chartership is still looking at the practical, how do we implement these new types of design or these new types of construction, and how do we push it into the industry, and it's very current and relevant to what we do day in, day out, rather than doing a theory and a dissertation on something that could have happened 40, 50, 60 years ago. My advice is to find a company that will invest in your training. So the best thing I ever did was not do this as a full-time course. So all of the practical experience that I got through the first 5 years whilst I was at uni is the reason why I understand the job as well as I do now. There's a lot of people who would come straight out of university and go into a business and expect that they know everything, and it's a bit hard hitting. They turn up, they've got the degree, but actually they don't really know anything. So I would find a company that's willing to invest. I would do the HNC degree course as a part-time, and it's all dependent on where you are, but you find yourself a good mentor, someone that's willing to put the time in with you. Always easier said than done. But that's my advice. You can do it full-time, but you'd find it a lot harder later on in life. You get a lot further a lot quicker if you do it the part-time route. Yeah, so I remember I did a period of time at the company, and then I came back when I was 16, and I was just doing some filing or something, and I just put some headphones in. I thought, I've got quite a lot of filing to do, let me put some headphones in and listen to it. I remember them saying to me, you don't want to listen to music, you just need to listen to the conversations that are happening around you, because the amount of information you'll pick up, even if you're not doing the work, you hear this conversation about something that's happening on this site, or an issue we've got on this project, or something that's happened really well here. If you're not listening, you don't know, do you? So that was one of the best pieces of advice that I had, was even in a surrounding where you might be doing something mundane, it's not to say that you're not going to pick things up, which later on in life you could say, oh, actually, I remember when you were talking about that in the office, and you can relate to it when something else has happened. So that was always a bit of an eye-opener for me, definitely. Started full-time at 17, I understood sort of the office setup, the expectation of how to present yourself, mannerisms of being in a meeting and things like that, which you don't, like you say, you wouldn't necessarily get that. That's not something you get at school or you get taught at college or university. That's only experience you'll get from actually working in the industry. If you start an industry quite young, when you end up having meetings when you are qualified at say 23, 24, with people that have been in the industry 30 years, it's important how you then conduct yourself in that manner, because it's quite easy for them to not necessarily respect your opinion or your view on things because they see you as a young person. But if you know how to conduct yourself and you have the knowledge base, then quite quickly you can demand the respect of people that might not necessarily think that they should give you the respect. So Communication's a big one. We're dealing with a lot of different people in different areas. So a surveyor's job, if you work in a development, for a developer for instance, or a main contractor, you're placing orders for every single aspect of the development, from the ground worker to the decorator and everything in between. So you need to know a lot about a lot. So you're dealing with everybody who works in specialised areas. So it's important to communicate, important to always want to learn, because they're the experts at the end of the day. If you're going to look at, I don't know, carpentry for instance, they're the expert in that field, but you need to know enough to be able to hold your own in those scenarios. So you need to be able to communicate, you need to be willing to listen. IT skills are important. We do the boring part of what we do, or the less enjoyable part of what we do, is dealing with spreadsheets quite a lot. So you need to be able to sort of use those skills with IT, phone mannerisms, things like that. As I said earlier, the way you sort of conduct yourself is important, but it's just being able to, you need to be a bit of a chameleon. You sort of need to be able to adapt to every sort of situation and believe in what you're trying to achieve, and not sort of back down. You've got to be a little bit fierce and a little bit brave and a bit bullshit sometimes to make sure you get your point across, and I think that's part of it. Different companies and stuff will have different approaches. We've got to be quite a bit more aggressive in our approach, because we have to try and make money. We're a PLC, for instance, we've got to make money for our shareholders. So we've got to be a little bit more aggressive towards making that margin. In smaller companies, if you were doing it on your own, for instance, obviously you want to make that money, but you can be a little bit softer and it's a little bit more friendly and things like that. If you can get on with everybody, even when you've had an argument with someone, if you by the next day you're still talking like normal, and that's the biggest thing. You need to be able to have a confrontation, leave it at the door, walk away, and then everything still be as normal the next day, which is easier said than done sometimes, but if you can get away with that 90% of the time, then you'll be all right. We sort of deal with everybody, so we would deal within the construction side. We're dealing with our technical managers or our technical engineers. We're dealing very much with our site managers, assistant site managers, project managers, sales. So we deal a lot with our sales team, because they'll build up a budget of what they want to sell for. We need to try and rein them in sometimes, because their revenues dictate how much profit we report, and we sort of deal with all of those people and put it all together in this, we call it a CVC, which is sort of our month-end report. And we put all of that information together, and that's what we're representing to our directors essentially on this site. But I need to get that information from my site managers, my project manager, my technical manager, my sales, our land team. All of those things come together in one place, and then we report it, which usually comes through the surveyor. So we deal with all those aspects. We're sort of almost the glue that holds it all together. We also, if you're a main contractor and you're working with a client, we'll be face to face with the client. So a lot of the time we're dealing with the client's PQS, which is sort of like an employer's agent. They work on the behalf of the client to do the valuations of the work that we've done. The client directly, banks for funding, if we're doing anything like that. We also deal with all the subcontractors. So everything apart from probably the residents when they move in. They're probably the only people that we don't normally get involved in. It's of everything. And that's why it doesn't get boring. So, with a surveyor, the way it would normally go is you start off as a trainee, so you would normally do a trainee, maybe an estimating role, like a trainee estimator, so you get used to the pricing side of things as well. Then you would go assistant surveyor, surveyor, senior surveyor, and then depending on the business, there's a few other roles that sort of stem out of that. So most companies will go up to senior surveyor, and then you would go either a managing surveyor or a commercial manager, which are almost pretty much the same thing. A managing surveyor would usually be on imagine a scheme in London where they're maybe £100 million. A managing surveyor would manage that one scheme, and they would have maybe 3 senior surveyors, 2 surveyors, 2 assistants, so on and so forth. So they're only managing that team on that one project. Whereas a commercial manager would then manage the whole of that region. So a commercial manager might manage 4 or 5 sites, and then above that is commercial director, and then above that's usually managing director. So for me, my next step would be to go either managing surveyor or commercial manager, and then go on to commercial director and then managing director. sometimes there's a few little stem offs where, depending on your background and what you've done and how involved you are with the business, you could go to new business development because that's generating new cash, but you need to understand the actual element of the cost side of things. So you can go that way. Sometimes you might work closely with the land team, so you're doing viabilities and feasibilities. So sometimes you have like a land surveyor. So there are other aspects as well, but usually in a developer or in a main contractor, you would go sort of senior surveyor, commercial manager, managing surveyor, commercial director, and then managing director. So. Oh, that's a good question. How diverse it was going to be. I think in my head it was like, oh, you go into a green field and you put a house up and someone comes and buys it and that's the end of it. But there's everything from start to finish is just, every day there's always going to be a struggle. Even like sending out a drawing to someone if you send the wrong revision, or technical haven't given you the right drawing yet, or sales are saying we're only selling it for 200 grand and you need to sell it for 250, and all of those things. I wish I'd understood then the amount of small battles you have every day just to get a small win at the end of one day. But I don't know if I changed that. I wish I'd known it before, but I think there's part and parcel of how you grow through the roles and why it makes it so interesting, I guess. But I think that would have been the one thing, always having to fight just for little wins, because it can be quite draining sometimes when you have little things that you want to get done and you can't because someone's holding you back. Yeah, so there's so many different aspects that just go into one element of works. You need the input from all of those people all at the same time, buying into the same vision. And if any one of those people is pulling in a different direction, it all falls apart. It's like a chair. It's just like we're all legs of a chair trying to get to the same thing. And if one of those legs goes, it all just comes tumbling down. So they're the things that make it a bit of a struggle, but it also makes it what it is, why it's so enjoyable sometimes. My final thoughts would be, and it's a bit cliche, but if you really love what you do, if you're passionate about whatever role you go into, whether it's being a bin man or whether it's working in politics or working as a senior surveyor, if you love it, then you don't actually go to work. You go to a place where you're working with good people, you're doing something you love, and you come away from it feeling like you've actually made a difference, or you get some self-fulfillment. If you go and do something that you don't like, well, every day is going to feel like work, and it's always going to be a struggle, and when you wake up in the morning, you're always going to dread it. And I never feel like that, because I'm doing a job that I'm passionate about and that I absolutely love. And I never feel like I go to work. I feel like I come and see my mates for 12 hours a day, and we have a chat, and occasionally we'll put a few buildings up. And that's what I would say, whatever it might be, whatever field, if you really, really want to do it, go and do it. Even if it takes longer, or you might have to go through a different route, or it's a bit tough, you'll never work a day in your life if you do something that you actually care about. And that would be my advice.